Alarming crime surge hits Canada. Fraser slammed amid CSIS Khalistani extremist threat. Since Mark Carney assumed the role of Canada's Prime Minister after the snap federal election on April 28, 2025, his government has been under intense pressure. Canadians are growing increasingly worried as crime rates surge in various parts of the country, and national security concerns multiply. Among the most alarming developments is the recent warning from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, regarding Khalistani extremist groups that are actively fundraising and organizing rallies within Canadian borders. This has ignited fears not only within communities here, but has also strained international ties, particularly with India. CSIS has emphasized that although most Sikh Canadians live peacefully and contribute positively to Canadian society, there is a small but radicalized faction exploiting Canada as a base for promoting separatist violence aimed at India. These extremists advocate for the creation of an independent Khalistan state, using Canadian soil to mobilize support, raise funds, and organize events that fuel tensions. This exposes a glaring vulnerability in Canada's approach to domestic extremism, where these dangerous actors seem to operate with relative freedom, raising serious questions about how well the government is managing this threat. The rise of Khalistani extremist activities is unfolding against a backdrop of a broader surge in crime that is devastating many Canadian communities. British Columbia, for example, is witnessing a steep increase in extortion, shootings, and gang-related violence. Official statistics paint a disturbing picture. Extortion cases have increased by over 350%, with violent criminals using intimidation tactics to target homes and businesses. What makes this situation worse is the justice system's struggle to keep repeat offenders detained, largely due to bail policies that many perceive as too lenient. This revolving door phenomenon, often described as catch and release, fuels deep frustration among law enforcement officers and terrified citizens alike. Conservative members of Parliament have not held back their criticism of the Liberal government and Attorney General Fraser for dismantling mandatory minimum sentences for crimes such as extortion. They argue that these reforms have prioritized criminals' legal rights over the safety of victims and the broader public. Their stance highlights a growing divide in Canadian politics over how to balance justice and security, with many fearing that current policies enable dangerous offenders to quickly return to their criminal activities, thus perpetuating cycles of violence and fear. In response, government officials contend that Canada's legal framework is robust and that bail decisions are rightly left to the courts. However, many communities are feeling abandoned, as overcrowded prisons and resource limitations force judges to release accused criminals who then continue to terrorize neighborhoods. This discrepancy between legal ideals and practical realities undermines public confidence in the justice system and raises calls for reform that addresses systemic challenges rather than shifting blame. The case of Jacob Funk in Williams Lake, British Columbia, has become emblematic of these systemic issues. Arrested more than 30 times, Funk's repeated releases coincide with surges in local crime, prompting local officials to plead with Prime Minister Carney and his administration for a reversal of soft-on-crime policies. Mayors and city leaders argue that public safety must come before protecting repeat violent offenders, emphasizing that residents' lives and property are at risk as these offenders remain free to wreak havoc. Alongside criminal justice concerns, questions are also being raised about Canada's immigration policies. While immigration remains essential to Canada's identity and economic growth, some citizens worry that current vetting processes do not sufficiently prevent criminal or extremist individuals from exploiting the system. The call for smarter, more stringent enforcement is growing louder, with an emphasis on ensuring that new Canadians positively contribute to society rather than inadvertently becoming involved in criminal or extremist activities. On the economic front, Prime Minister Carney is confronting a separate but equally difficult challenge. His government's enforcement of the digital services tax targeting major technology companies has sparked tension in trade relations. While Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne has hinted at possible negotiations to include the tax in broader trade talks, the ongoing dispute threatens Canada's economic recovery and complicates its relationships with key global partners. The tax has become a flashpoint in wider debates about economic sovereignty and globalization. Experts warn that resolving these trade disputes will not be straightforward. Issues such as supply management, tariffs, and border security are tightly interconnected, making negotiations complex and delicate. Carney's apparent interest in strengthening economic ties with Europe presents both opportunity and risk. Given Europe's own economic uncertainties and Canada's historic dependence on North American trade, this strategy must be carefully managed to avoid jeopardizing vital partnerships and market stability. Canada now finds itself at a critical crossroads. Internally, surging crime rates, exacerbated by judicial leniency and extremist threats, are eroding the sense of safety and community trust that Canadians rely on. Externally, trade tensions and economic challenges require skilled diplomacy and pragmatic solutions to protect national interests in an increasingly competitive global economy. The pressure on Prime Minister Carney, Attorney General Fraser, and the cabinet to deliver real and effective policies is immense. Canadians expect a government that can restore public safety, uphold justice, and foster economic resilience amid a rapidly changing world. The administration must work closely with provincial governments to ensure resources and laws empower law enforcement and protect communities. Failing to act decisively could deepen public distrust in government institutions, fracture social cohesion, and undermine Canada's long-term prosperity. Coordinated efforts to improve funding for policing, reform bail and sentencing laws where necessary, and enhance immigration enforcement are all critical. At the same time, Carney's government must balance these domestic priorities with shrewd management of international trade relationships. As debates unfold in Parliament and public forums, the eyes of Canadians remain fixed on the government's response. The coming months will be a test of whether Carney's leadership can rise to these intertwined challenges, safeguarding Canadians at home while securing Canada's economic future on the world stage.